Thank you everybody for coming on tonight. We're so excited here. We are working with color with Lily and Danielle. We're going to go ahead and share some imperative information. Again, I'm Tracy, the founder of BRCA Strong. We're here to educate, empower, support, and advocate providers, survivors, and thrivers to eliminate the feeling of isolation and help you feel whole again. We do that by funding post-mastectomy garments and needs that you need after your mastectomy journey. And at this time, I'd like to pass it over to Lily, and thank you guys so much again for coming on and helping us educate the community during these times and continuous times.
Great, thank you for that. So as Tracy said, my name is Lily. I am a genetic counselor at Color. And prior to coming to Color about 5 years ago, I set up and ran the genetic cancer clinic at a hospital in Mountain View, California, El Camino Hospital. And I've got Danielle here with me, and I'm not sure, I think she's muted right now, but she works on my team with providers and organizations like BRCA Strong, helping facilitate educational opportunities or different ways for us to give back and connect with the community. So Tracy invited us to speak today a little bit about genetics, since we wanted to do sort of a back to basics on genetics and genetic testing. Just I think as a foundation, when you're in some of these other conversations or at appointments and you're learning about all the different options you have or the things that you're doing, really trying to understand back at the beginning, like what's going on? Why do I need to think about this? Why do I need to consider these different medical options? So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I only have one desktop right now. So you should be able to see my screen, and I'm going to go ahead and go into presentation mode. So again, thank you so much for having us here tonight. I wanted to talk a little bit about genetic testing for hereditary cancer and risk and background and the history of just genetic testing in general. Talk a little bit about BRCA1 and 2, but also the genes beyond that and why they're important. I'm going to share a very special patient story, and then talk a little bit about genetic testing results. What kind of information can people learn from genetic testing, as well as testing options. Please feel free to jump in with questions. I'm also going to share some data from some studies that I've worked on and that I think are interesting. There's so much information here, and I love talking about genetics, so I didn't go too deep into any one thing, just some pieces that I think are interesting and really relevant to know about. But we can definitely do another talk at some point where we go deeper into certain areas. And please, I think there's ability to add comments or questions, or we'll have time at the end for that as well. So a little bit of a brief history on cancer genetics. So it hasn't actually been that long since we've known about the BRCA1, BRCA2 genes, as well as other hereditary cancer genes like the MLH1, PMS2, that MSH2, MSH6 that cause a syndrome called Lynch syndrome, which I'll talk a little bit about. But it was 1990 that we first identified the BRCA1 gene, 1994 that we discovered BRCA2. A lot of it in part to Dr. Mary Claire King. She was the scientist who, cloned those genes to begin with, and also sort of realized, there's something genetic going on there. There's these families that just have more than their fair share of the same type of cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, things like that. Fast forward to 2001, where we were actually able to sequence the whole human genome, and that really unlocked a lot of ability to discover genes and their function and what they do within the human body. And then in 2005, fast forward a little bit further, we discovered a technology called next generation sequencing, which allowed us to sequence genes much faster and much less expensive than it had been before then. A few more years of research and development, and now many labs are now offering these next generation sequencing tests for whole panels of genes. So not just sequencing one gene at a time, but being able to sequence multiple genes together. And then a big thing that happened in 7 years ago in 2013, almost exactly 7 years ago, I think it was in June The Supreme Court ruled that BRCA1 and 2, the genes, you can't actually patent a human gene. Because prior to that, a laboratory in Utah had patented the BRCA1 and 2 genes because and were the ones holding a monopoly on the testing for that. So if you had testing done prior to 2013, there's only one lab that did it commercially, and which meant that they could charge whatever they wanted and owned all the data. Now we've actually had, many years of other laboratories doing this, which has really allowed for the price of testing to significantly drop and many more people to get access to it. And that's, color came into this, the laboratory I work at about 5 years ago, but really one of the things that helped us, as well as all of these other platforms, has been that the cost of sequencing has dramatically dropped, and Moore's law is there, and that's just sort of the showing how as technology advances, or as it's been around longer, it becomes less and less expensive. For example, a big screen TV 20 years ago was thousands and thousands of dollars, and now you can go to Costco and you can get a big, nice flat screen TV for a few $100s. And the same thing has happened with genetic testing and genetic sequencing. For the most part, you can get every gene in your body sequenced for a few $1,000s, where before, the first human genome sequenced was, millions and millions of dollars worth of project. So we have the ability. Why would someone want to do this testing? Why would you want to have this information? Even if it was free, even if it was being given away, why would this information be helpful to learn? So I'm gonna back up even further about how this information gets in your body, how it's there. So your body is made up of cells. Inside of each of your cells are your chromosomes, and that's a package of DNA, and DNA provides instructions telling your body how to grow, how to develop, how to protect your cells from replicating out of control and turning into a cancer, turning into a tumor. And we've got about 30,000 different genes doing different functions within our bodies, and they're not all the same. So there's going to be genetic changes every time that cell replicates. Errors get made. Sometimes the errors get spell checked, they get fixed. Sometimes they don't. And this happens within our germline as well. So your eggs, sperm cells, they can have errors made in them, and that's sort of the very start of this, and that gets passed down through generations. You have these mutations, which are often pathogenic or deleterious, are different words you'll hear for it. Sometimes it's just called a mutation. But what happens in that genetic code, if it's correct, if there's no errors, a functional protein gets made, and that protein is what does everything it's supposed to do within the cell. If there's an error there, why are you being squirrely? If the error is there, then no protein gets made. What is happening? Then no protein gets made, and that gene might not be operating properly. Sorry, my mouse or computer seems to be switching slides on its own, which is fun. Okay. So disconnected from that. So most genetic variants, most of the time the pathogenic variants, the genetic variants we have do not increase risk for disease. The ones that we do have are called pathogenic mutations or deleterious mutations. They're often just referred to as mutations. On average, in a general population, about 1 to 2% of people will have a mutation that impacts their risk for cancer. So if you went to, well, not right now because none of the baseball stadiums are open, but under normal circumstances, if you went to like a baseball field, a diamond, a professional baseball field on a day where everything is, where it's full, only about 1 to 2% of people at random would have a mutation that increases their risk for cancer. Things that make this chance a little bit higher are things like ethnicity or ancestry. So certain ethnicities or ancestry have higher risk. If you have a personal or family history of cancer, that risk is going to be higher as well. Now, in general, if we look at, so for example, if we look at everyone who has cancer, about 10 to 15% of those people who have cancer, it's going to be due to an inherited mutation. There's going to be a genetic change that was passed down from parent to child that caused them to have an increased risk for cancer. So things that are, make us think there could be a hereditary cancer syndrome in the family, or if we see several close family members with a diagnosis, early onset cancer, so often that means like under age 50. If someone has more than one cancer in their lifetime, those are all things that make us think, there could be something going on here. That being said, having done this for a long time, we've also seen many cases where I wouldn't have expected there to be a hereditary mutation causing risk, but there was, maybe just no one in the family talked about it, or there was a lot of men in the family and it's a breast cancer gene, so we didn't see as many cases show up as we'd expect. There's also a percentage of cancers that tend to be familial, meaning there's more cancers running in that family than we'd expect by chance alone, but we can't find a mutation. It could be that maybe there's a gene out there that we just haven't discovered yet. We also think that shared environmental or lifestyle could play a role. And then sporadic cancer means it happens by chance. It's not due to an inherited genetic mutation or inherited genetic change. So on a cellular level, people who have a hereditary cancer, the cancers that they get don't really happen differently. They don't look differently necessarily than someone who gets a sporadic cancer. But what happens for someone who has a genetic mutation, they have one copy of that gene that works in every cell in their body, and they have another copy of that gene that they inherited from one of their parents that unfortunately doesn't work. It's making that abnormal protein. And most of the genes that work within cancer, in these hereditary cancer syndromes, are ones that prevent tumors from happening or control the cell cycle or control parts of the cell cycle that do the spell checking, that help regulate and check for errors within the cell. So in order for cancer to develop, you need to get 2 mutations in the same gene in the same cell. People who have hereditary cancer, they already start with 1 mutation in every cell. So all they need is 1 hit, 1 mutation in any one of those cells, and it could develop into a tumor, could develop into a cancer. So they start kind of like, they go up to bat with 1 strike already. So it's higher chance that they would get a cancer in their lifetime, or higher chance that they would get more than 1 type of cancer. Now, these genes that we tend to look at when we're thinking about hereditary cancer don't stay in one lane for the most part. They go all over the place into different systems. I know that many of you are familiar with BRCA1, BRCA2. These are genes that increase risk for breast, ovarian, pancreatic, and prostate cancer. BRCA2 we also know is related to melanoma. There's other genes that we often test for. If we see a family that we think may have a hereditary cancer syndrome, we'd usually do a large panel that looks something like this. And so we may learn about other genes as well. So there's genes that cause a syndrome called Lynch syndrome. That's these genes right here, the MLH1 through EpCAM. And those relate to more gynecological cancers for women, so ovarian, uterine, colorectal cancer as well, pancreatic for some of them, stomach for some of them. Another gene that we also now often test for, a handful of genes we often test for, are considered what is lower penetrance, or not as high of risk as the BRCA1, BRCA2 genes. So those are genes down here like PALB2, CHEK2, ATM, NBN, where they do increase risk for breast cancer and some other cancers, but the risk isn't quite as high. So the impacts of these genes on risk can vary. It varies from men to women. But as you can see, the risk of developing cancer, if you have a mutation in one of these genes, is much higher than that of someone in the general population. And that's ultimately the reason why someone might want to consider doing this genetic testing. So if someone has a BRCA1 mutation, we know that her risk to develop breast cancer is about 80% in the, compared to about 10% in the average population. Her risk of ovarian is also quite high, so it goes from 1% up to, can be upwards of 50%. Lynch syndrome, additionally, that's sort of thinking about colon cancer. So we know these people have a much higher risk to develop cancer than someone in the average population. We also know that there's pretty good screening or preventative options for a lot of these cancers. And in a perfect world, we would know who each of these people are who have these mutations before they're ever diagnosed in that sort of pre-Viver state, so that we can do screening, we can do preventative options to lower the chances of them ever developing cancer, or at the very least detecting it at the earliest, most treatable stage, where we have a much better outcomes than when we detect something late stage by surprise, especially in this population where we do see those younger diagnoses. We're not often doing breast cancer screening in women who are in their 30s. We're not often doing colon cancer screening in people who are in their 30s or 40s. But if we know that you have this increased risk, we will do those things and make sure we're preventing or detecting early. Now, this information is really important for you, the individual who has this result, but because it's hereditary, because as I said, it gets passed down from one generation to the next, it's also really valuable for family members. So if I have a mutation, it means that my brother, my sister, my parents, my children, each have a 50-50 chance of having that same mutation. And it's gonna be really helpful for them to know that. At Color, we really wanna make sure people have access to this information. We know one of the barriers can sometimes be cost, it can sometimes be access to testing. So we offer, if you have a 50-50 chance, if you have a first-degree relative who has a mutation and your risk is 50-50, your relatives can get the color testing for just $50 rather than our normal $250 price. We can share this information out afterwards. Just for, if any of you guys have relatives who are still waiting to be tested, this is something that they could look into. They can also go to their doctor's office. They can also go to their genetic counselor, and they'll be able to help connect them with testing. It may be covered by insurance, but I like people to have as many options as possible to get this information, hopefully before they ever get a diagnosis. So I want to talk a little bit about beyond BRCA1 and BRCA2. So that was really, like I said, for the longest time when genetic testing was expensive, those were sort of the two genes that everybody knew about. Angelina Jolie did a lot of work making sure these are the genes everybody knew about, which is great. A lot of people ended up getting tested and learning about this because of that. But they're not the only genes that can increase risk for breast and ovarian cancer. And getting a negative result for BRCA1 and 2 does not mean you necessarily you don't have a hereditary cancer syndrome in your family. So I'm going to turn it over to Danielle to share her story with us a little bit as well.
Yeah, thank you, Lily. So hello, everyone. My name is Danielle, and well, first of all, I hope everyone's doing well. But I have tested positive for a PMS2 mutation, which is associated with Lynch syndrome. So we can dial it back a little bit. And when I was about a senior in high school in 2011, I found out that my mom had breast cancer on my birthday. Luckily, we were able to catch it early. It was stage 2, and she had the option of moving forward with a double mastectomy. The only high school volleyball game she missed of mine was the night she had her surgery. At the time, like Lily mentioned, BRCA1 and 2 testing options were incredibly limited, and she was offered testing because she was young, and we had a history of pancreatic cancer in the family, and so she decided to get tested. But she did come back negative for BRCA1 and 2, and spent the next 5 years trying to determine what the cause of her cancer was, like I'm sure a lot of people do. When I was in my senior year at Virginia Tech, I was taking a human genetics course. And during the course, a genetic counselor came in and talked with the class about the roles genetic counselors play in genetics and medicine. Unfortunately, that was the one day I was out sick. But as I was studying her slides for our test the following week, I decided this is what I want to do. I want to put my focus here, and I want to pursue genetic counseling after I graduate. And I had texted both my mom and my aunt, who was an OBGYN at Kaiser, and let them know. I was like, I finally found direction. I have a goal. I'm going to become a genetic counselor after school. And all I got back was, that's ironic, from my aunt. And turns out the reason it was ironic was because my mom had decided to go through an additional set of testing for Lynch syndrome. And because of our family history, as you can see, my aunt died from pancreatic cancer at age 45. My mom was diagnosed at age 45 with breast cancer. So testing for Lynch syndrome came back with a positive mutation in the PMS2 gene. And like Lily said, the PMS2 gene is basically a gene that where the autocorrect doesn't work. So we have one functioning autocorrect and one non-functioning autocorrect. it was kind of funny because I remember my mom called my aunt after she got her results back, and my aunt was like, well, I don't know what this means, and that in itself solidified like why genetic counselors are so important in the role of medicine, because they're really good resources. They can help walk you through these results. And I knew, as Lily explains, that my sisters and I have two younger sisters, we both had 50% chances of also having the mutation. I knew in my gut, once my mom tested positive, that I would also test positive for PMS2. And that feeling was validated when I had a chance to get tested through color. And, you know, for me, it hasn't changed much. I'm a pretty active person. I like to eat healthy. And so that has stayed the same. I've definitely, you know, reduced my alcohol intake because of that. And I'm also very aware of the screening guidelines now. So I know when I reach certain age milestones, I have to start taking steps to make sure that I stay on top of my health. And I was, you know, very fortunate to be able to come to work with Color. After I graduated, I searched genetic testing companies in the Bay Area, and within a week I had a job at Color. And so over the last 3 years, I've had the fortune of working in from the customer support team to now working with physicians and advocacy groups like BRCA Strong all across the country, and with the help of my boss around the world. To make sure that we're providing access to this information to anyone who wants to have access to it. And I'm a really firm believer in knowledge is power, and that belief is what helps me spread the word about genetic testing and why it's important.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's my mom and I. This past Easter, we went snowshoeing because it was a socially distant activity to do during COVID.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think Danielle's story is one of those where, like, from a genetic counseling standpoint, you look at it and you say, like, oh, well, of course, this looks like a BRCA1 or 2 family. Someone diagnosed at 45 and she was negative. Well, obviously, because she doesn't have a BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutation. And she's not the only case I've seen like this. I've seen many of them when I was in clinical practice, also working at Color. We've been, you know, as testing's become more available, expanded testing has really just led to more understanding for us as clinicians, but also for families to know that why, you know, they're often wondering, why did I get this cancer? Where did this diagnosis come from? And more testing, more information can sometimes help provide that. So this is just a graph looking at sort of some of these high risk genes. That'd be like your BRCA1, your BRCA2, your TP53, have a high risk of breast cancer. And then some of these more moderate ones, that's your PALB2, your NBN. And then these are the ones that we often are testing for, the high risk and moderate risk. The ones we don't hear that are really common that each give you a little bit of risk, a little bit of increased risk, those are not commonly or regularly tested for, but they may be in the future. And it may be that some families where it looks like there's more than their fair share of cancer, it might be that they just have more than their fair share of these common variants that give you just a little bit of risk each together. So I think there's always genetics at play. It just might not always be one big gene or one medium gene. It could be many, many little genes together causing an increase in risk. So I've been lucky enough to be involved in some really cool research at Color, and, you know, prior to Color as well, looking at, you know, how often are we seeing mutations in these particular genes when we're looking at, you know, individuals, for testing people for individuals or for hereditary cancer risk. And this was a American College of Medical Genetics and Genomics poster looking at the frequency of panel testing in about 3,000 people. And we've since expanded this, and we find similar results as we keep expanding to larger and larger populations. But BRCA1 and BRCA2 tend to be most common, followed by a gene called CHEK2, which also is pretty common. There's a couple of mutations that are really common in there, and particularly in European ancestry. And then it sort of just tails out from there. It makes a nice little slide or curve down to the end, where there's some genes where it's pretty rare still. It's, even if you test a bunch of people, it's still pretty infrequent that you would find a mutation in one of those genes. But we tend to follow this sort of graph that, you know, BRCA1 and 2 are actually pretty common. What I think that the main thing here is that, like, while BRCA1 and 2 accounted for about a third of the mutations we identified, 66% of them were outside of this. So there's a good chance that when you're seeing a family history of cancer, that it's not BRCA1 or 2, that it's something outside of that, really increasing the awareness of doing this expanded testing, or reinforcing the importance of doing this larger testing is really important, especially within, you know, underrepresented populations that don't often get access to this type of testing. Now, I know BRCA1 and 2 testing has also been a really commonly pushed on thing within the Jewish population, and there's 3 mutations that are considered founder mutations, or mutations that are really common within that population. Then for a long time, it was only those 3 mutations that were ever tested. And again, yep, they're often found. However, we looked at, you know, because we're doing full sequencing, if we look at all the people who we tested who are Jewish, or said they have Jewish ancestry, Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry, again, a lot of them don't have a variant, don't have mutation identified. About half had a mutation identified in one of those common founder mutations, that's the orange. The other half, nope, had a mutation in something else, had a mutation in a different gene. So really, again, underscoring, even in a population where we think we know everything, we think we know the right way to test them, it's actually different. You know, it's actually, there's still more there. There's other genes, there's other bits of information that are really important. So again, that's what we're looking at. We had about a 4.5% pathogenic rate, which is also higher than the previously reported 2 to 2.5% pathogenic rate within this population. But we found mutations in genes outside of BRCA1 and 2, commonly, again, that CHEK2, which like I said, is common in the Jewish population. So again, suggesting that panel testing, a large panel test, is actually more effective in this population, especially since testing is, the cost of testing is so affordable now. And then lastly, we looked at access to testing, looking at doing a panel test, but looking at it sort of as it related to qualifying for testing with insurance. So that's, I know, a big barrier for a lot of people, especially when testing was thousands and thousands of dollars. And in our population that we looked at, only about 60% of the people who would have qualified for testing under NCCN guidelines. And if we look at the 40% of people who didn't qualify, we still found a 4% pathogenic rate. And we've also expanded this data as well, and we find even higher numbers in some other populations as well. But really showing that a lot of people, even if you don't qualify for insurance testing, there's still a chance you have a mutation. And we have some other studies that have shown about 8%. So it could be anywhere to 4 to 8% of the time. If you have a mutation, you may not have qualified for insurance. So really underscoring the importance of making this accessible. Medicare is even worse. We find it even, their criteria are even more restrictive. Only about 20% of our population that we looked at here would have qualified for Medicare testing. And amongst the people who didn't qualify, we had a 6.2% pathogenic rate. So really trying to increase access is very important to us at Color. So when people are thinking about genetic testing, what's really important to consider? You understand what you would do with the information, you understand the risks that go along with this. What else do you want to think about when you're thinking about testing? So there's a lot of things that might go into this decision, and it's intensely personal and complex. So is it the right time for you to know? What would you do if you're positive? Would you want to do just screening for breast cancer? Would you consider preventative surgery? What are you thinking about with regards to having children? Interestingly enough, at this time right now with the COVID-19 situation, we've been having conversations with people saying, like, normally when you get a result back, if you're positive for a BRCA mutation, for example, you're told, all right, time to get a mammogram, time to think about to do an MRI, think about surgery options, think about risk reducing surgery for ovarian cancer, but a lot of those aren't necessarily available depending on what state you're in, where you live. A lot of hospitals are considering those elective or unnecessary, medical procedures right now. So thinking about to yourself, if I learn this information right now, today, is it going to be really hard for me to know there's something that I have, know there's something I should be doing, but I can't do it because of the current situation that's going on in the medical system? And for some people, it's like, nope, I want to know, I have it, whether I know about it or not. Like, I just want to get this done with and know, and I will get my appointment scheduled and I will go as soon as things open up. Some people say, no, I think I do want to wait. I want to wait a little bit until I, when I get the information, I want to jump into action. I want to be able to do that. And that's really where genetic counselors can be helpful, helping you talk through what are the pros and cons of testing and help you in that sort of shared decision making. It's not a great URL, but National Society of Genetic Counselors, nsgc.org, has a Find a Genetic Counselor service. So if you want to talk with a genetic counselor, you can certainly find one. I know many of them are doing telehealth for the first time for a lot of them, doing remote counseling to help make sure people have access to get their questions answered, do this decision making even at this time so they can be tested.
Lily, I don't know if you saw, there is a question. I don't know if you want to wait till the end to answer it or if you could see it in the chat.
I can't see it, but there we go. Ooh. So Talila said she was tested in 2002 and gave BRCA2 due to both her mom and her dad's having breast cancer. It was common in their family is breast and lung on mom's side and ovarian and prostate on dad's. Could this be from two different types of genes? She's African American, 7 brothers. 5 of us have been tested and all have the BRCA2. One sister was tested as negative. She could, so if I'm reading this correctly, that there was breast cancer on both sides of the family. And tested in 2002, so you would have had just BRCA1 and 2. They found a BRCA2 mutation, and other relatives have been tested, presumably probably just for that BRCA2 mutation. And you could consider genetic testing for additional genes. So for example, that's a great point. I didn't even put it in this presentation because that's another gotcha we've sort of discovered as we've been doing these larger panel testing, is families where we knew there was a mutation running in the family. We've tested them on a larger panel and we find the mutation that we know runs in the family, but then we find something else in it instead or additionally. So we find that about 5% of our families where there's a known mutation, there's something else as well. So someone like your sister, for example, who tested negative, she's negative for the mutation that she was tested for, that BRCA2 mutation that we knew ran in the family, but there could very well be a second mutation running in the family that might explain, for example, if you know this mutation comes from your father's side, this explains his side of the family. But there might be something else going on mom's side, CHEK2, ATM, some other gene. It could just be, again, it might be nothing. It might be the sporadic kind or familial on that side that we can't put our finger on. But I think there's definitely an argument to be made for doing additional testing, particularly in families where they only had testing for, 1 or 2 genes and they found something, they got an answer. They might have only gotten part of the answer. So some of this panel testing or update testing can be really helpful even in the context where there's a known mutation in the family. Great question, and thanks for bringing that up. I didn't even put it in here because it's been, again, I didn't want to take all the time talking about everything because it's just, there's so much to think about and so much information when we're talking about genetic testing. One thing I do want to touch on, and I think this comes up when people are thinking about genetic testing as well, is how is this information used? There are laws in place. So for example, at Color, like no one's PHI is shared without a patient's consent. That's the same for like your health system, is that like you go to a doctor, they're not going to be able to share your information. If your boss calls up, they can't share information without your specific consent. Results are, you have options when you're usually doing genetic testing. There's things you can opt into or opt out of with regards to things like research, how your data is used. Data should be protected with HIPAA compliant encryption, as well as encryption to make sure that data is protected. There's also protection against discrimination on a larger scale. So there's a law called GINA, or Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, that prevents an employer, for the most employers, as well as health insurance, from asking about this information or using this information to discriminate. They can't deny promotion or deny healthcare coverage because of these types of results. Life insurance, unfortunately, does not have those same protections, so that is something people might consider when doing testing, is having a life insurance policy in place first. But some states do actually have life insurance protection. It's just not national yet. So lastly, what types of results do you get from this testing? Most people get a negative result. Even if you have a personal or family history of cancer, most of the time it's going to be negative. Again, only 10 to 15% of people who even have personal or family history of cancer get a positive. So most are negative, meaning no mutations were identified in the genes or portions of the gene that were covered by this test. This is reassuring, but it does not mean that someone's risk-free. So for example, maybe you're only tested for 2 genes. There could be other explanations out there. We're not doing a whole genome for the most part. And even if we were, it's not going to be complete. There might be other things that could cause this risk outside of your genes. So it's still really important to talk with your doctor about screening, about prevention, because there might be things they would do for you. They might consider you higher risk, even if you don't have a specific genetic mutation identified. Now, a small percentage of people, and I know I've got a highly curated group here that this may have been more of your case, where a mutation was identified. That does mean that we found something that increases your risk for cancer. And different genes, different mutations within genes actually carry different risk, carry different screening recommendations. So the screening recommendations that a person gets when they're told that they have a mutation that causes Lynch syndrome, like Danielle's family, is going to be different than if you have a BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutation. That means you have a higher risk for things like breast and ovarian cancer. There's an organization called the National Comprehensive Cancer Network that puts out consensus guidelines for what people should do for screening and prevention with regards to things like BRCA, Lynch syndrome, as well as other genes. So it's important for patients to work with their care providers to make a personalized plan based off these guidelines, based off other information, based on personal preference, because it's not a one-size-fits-all. Just because the guidelines are saying one thing, that might not be the right choice for you. So it's important to talk with your doctor, because you and your doctor will know best. And lastly, it can be important to share these information with relatives, because they may benefit from testing as well. They may also have that increased chance and want to do testing for themselves to know if they also have an increased risk for cancer. Now, some people might also get a result that's called a variant of uncertain significance. This is one of the things that happens as we test for more and more genes. We find things that we don't exactly know what they mean yet. We find changes within the genes, variants, that we just haven't seen enough of before. We haven't seen often enough. So we don't know if it's going to cause an increased risk for disease, disorders, or if it's going to be harmless. Most of the time it's harmless. Almost always it turns out to be harmless at the end. But again, we don't have quite enough information at the time that we find it to know. Most laboratories keep following these results. We do at Color, and update the provider, update the patient if that variant changes in a way that would be significant for your healthcare. So in these situations, they should be treated as though it's a negative result. Should be treated as though this is not what's causing the personal or family history, and the recommendations for screening for risk reduction should be based on the personal and family history alone, not on this result. This result is essentially not informative for the personal or family history. So lastly, things to remember, mutations that impact risk for disorders covered by some tests can also impact risk for others. So you might be going in thinking, I'm learning about my breast cancer risk, that's all that's in the family, that's all I'm worried about. But while you learn about risk for that, you may also learn about risk for something like thyroid cancer and what you have to do about that at the end of the day. And lastly, no genetic test detects everything. It's possible that some types of genetic tests which increase the chance of disease or disorder might not be detected by a genetic test, meaning no test is going to pick up things 100% of the time. So it's possible that it's certain that there's families out there that have hereditary cancer syndromes, have something genetic going on, and they've had tons of testing, but we just can't figure out what it is yet. Our science or technology isn't able to do that yet. So that's what I had. I wanted to just, Danielle and I put together a little promo code for you. So if you are interested in color testing and you're not eligible for the family testing program, you're more than welcome to use the code BRCAstrong at checkout and you get $50 off. You can share that with friends, family members, whomever. Tracy has this as well. I know she shares it out. I wanted to make sure you guys had that as well as a thank you for attending. And lastly, open it up for questions.
You know, Lily, I don't know, before we pass it over for questions, if you don't mind, maybe like explaining a little bit about the color process, or if you want me to, just I've been through it. Like I just want the girls to know that it's kind of different than obviously just going to your doctor's office and getting your testing.
Yeah, color is a little bit unique. Again, we really wanted to focus on helping people have access to testing. So we started off by making that very easy, where you can request or purchase a kit online. So you go to color.com/product, like I put there, and you can purchase the color test. We'll mail you a testing kit to your house. You can have your own physician order it for you, or we have a network of providers that review your personal and family history and place the order. So it's always physician ordered. You provide your sample, which is just a saliva sample. So it's not anything where you need to do a blood draw or go anywhere. It's actually been really, really useful at this time where people aren't supposed to go anywhere. So you can have it shipped directly to your home, do your saliva sample, pack it up. You go online, make an account, register it. Like if anyone's done 23andMe or Ancestry, it's similar to that sort of process. Then you pick it up and ship it back to us. And then several weeks later, you get an email saying your results are ready. And you can schedule an appointment to speak with one of our genetic counselors at that time. We'll walk you through your results, make sure you understand them, answer any questions that you might have. And then you have an online access to your report and results and information that may get updated regularly. We push out that update to you through that portal. And Tracy may have some comments to add because she actually did it as a patient.
You know, so I was diagnosed in 2004 with BRCA, and my testing was originally done through another company, and decided, you know, I came across color and decided I wanted to get a retest just for curiosity. It was like 10 years later, and did a retest. And I actually thought it was pretty impressive. Forget, you know, when we're diagnosed, or when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, you're offered genetic testing, you know, you're watching a video or your physician's telling you what it's about. You know, I got a one-on-one, basically, like Lily was my genetic counselor at the time, I guess. It ran down, you know, it was interesting to see the difference perspective from an actual genetic counselor versus, you know, my breast surgeon, and finding out the risks and knowing my options. I felt that it was extremely informative, and know that I can reach out to Color and get my questions answered now, where I know with other companies you don't have that access. So I felt that, you know, as an advocate and showing other women about genetic testing and sharing, I thought it was very intriguing to partner with Color and share the experience, so other women know that, you know, you're not just going in a room and watching a video. You actually get to speak to a live person and walk through the whole process of how genetic testing is and knowing your risks. So with that, what I'm going to do now is open up to questions. If you guys either want to, I can unmute everybody, or you guys can raise your hand. If anybody has questions, I'm sure Lily and Danielle would be happy to help. I'll unmute all. Go ahead, Tammy.
So I'm sorry I had to jump. My work call ended late, and then I had to jump on late, so I might have missed a little bit something. I'm BRCA1 positive, and my experience with genetic testing was not so great. It was through a doctor's office and with a phone, put me in a weird quiet room by myself with a phone call with a stranger on the other end trying to, like, you know, explain everything. But, you know, my doctor talked a lot about, I had already had ovarian cancer when I was very young. My mother died of cancer. Like, cancer is just rampant in my family. But they also my doctor also said, you know, monitoring for skin, for pancreatic, for all of these other things. My mother died of multiple myeloma. So, I mean, what other things should we be concerned about? I know that it's breast cancer and ovarian cancer and pancreatic and skin, but, you know, I'm hearing, but my mother's cancer was not any of those.
Yeah, so we do sometimes see that where, the cancers that we know to be associated, we've done research and we've done large studies where we know they're associated, which are the ones that I mentioned. So there's one that has come out recently where we think like there's a serous uterine cancer that we think has a higher risk for women who have BRCA1 mutations like yourself. But the multiple myeloma, that's one that we haven't seen yet. But that being said, like I've definitely seen BRCA2 families where I'm like, there's weird lung cancers here and there's brain tumors and just stuff like isn't associated in the literature, but is showing up. So there's not specific screening guidelines or things like that, but I think there's probably in some cases a higher risk for just many different types of cancer, but the ones that we know have the very high risk, like ovarian, breast, pancreatic, stomach. And again, even pancreatic, it's not, it's like 2% versus like, but the average risk for pancreatic cancer is like less than 1%. So it's higher, it's elevated, it's increased. So I'm guessing there's maybe like an elevated risk for lots of cancers, but it's elevated over like a little bit where it's not enough to quite show up in the studies, but there's probably some background risk that's higher in this population than others.
So it's interesting because Tammy asked you real quick, Tammy said, something interesting, and it just made me ring a bell to you. Tammy and I have very similar stories, except for she had ovarian cancer, but is BRCA2 and has, prostate cancer and other cancers in her family. And then her mom has multiple myeloma. Now I'm BRCA2 and my mom was just diagnosed with multiple myeloma. So my question is like, is there any correlation? Do we know of like BRCA and multiple myeloma?
There might be. I mean, I'd have to look at the literature a little bit. It's also just as you get older, your risk for cancer increases. So it's possible we're just, multiple myeloma is like definitely one of those cancers you do see a little bit more often in the older population. So it could be coincidental. But like I said, there may just be a little bit higher background risk for it, for people that have these genetic mutations for cancers. But the hematological malignancies aren't specifically thought to be associated with BRCA1 or BRCA2. But again, like we don't know everything about this. For a long time, we just thought it was breast and ovarian cancer. We were ignoring the men entirely and didn't think prostate was related and didn't think pancreatic was related. And now we know better. So I think that's one of the things as as an advocacy organization, as a member of an advocacy organization, as a patient, as a provider, you're constantly having to relearn what you thought you knew about these genes because it changes, because we keep doing research, we keep learning, and what we knew last year is different this year, or different today. And luckily that the screening guidelines do tend to change quickly and reflect that. So the NCCN does stay on top of that, and they do update that as time goes on. Lily, you have your hand?
Yes, hi. Did you call Tallulah or who's next? I'm sorry.
Tammy had one more question, I think. Go ahead, Tammy, and then Tallulah, you can go next. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
You're
The only other question I really had is that I currently have a 16-year-old daughter, and because I had ovarian cancer at 19, obviously I'm 42. I survived it. We caught it quick, which is like a rarity, but and then later on I got it again and had to have a hysterectomy. At what age is the appropriate age ethically, really ethically to test the kids? Because I do not want to just discourage her from trying to have children, or, because a lot of women make the choice, well, if I have this gene, I'm not having, I don't really know is there an age limit, and what is the ethical advice on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'd say, like, in general, the recommendation for BRCA1 and 2 is, the screening and recommendations from the NCCN doesn't start until a person's 25 for the most part. Ovarian cancer screening actually doesn't usually start until 30s. So your family might be a unique case where your doctor, your healthcare team would say, in your family, we actually want to do some screening, some things a little bit earlier because of, we've seen such an early case in your family. For testing, so traditionally the testing for BRCA isn't recommended until someone is 18 years old. At Color, we're not able to test anyone under the age of 18. But I can tell you in clinic before, like back before working at Color, I would occasionally test someone under the age of 18. You know, if they'd had a very early onset cancer in their family, if I'd done, you know, had really good conversations with them and they've expressed a level of maturity that made me feel comfortable testing someone at like age 16, 17. I wouldn't do much earlier than that for this case. Again, I'd be talking with your doctor and her doctor and saying, like, you know, if she is positive, when would they start screening? When would they want to do that? Would they want to do, you know, transvaginal ultrasound and CA 125 on a 18, 19-year-old because you have that experience yourself?
It's scary. I don't want her to, you know, go through that, but this is traumatic too. So what do? You know?
And wanting her to feel like she's empowered by this information and being able to make, that's again a reason why you usually wait till a little bit later so they can make an autonomous decision about it. The thing you mentioned about wanting people not to feel like they shouldn't have children, again, there's different paths and choices for everyone, but if you do have a mutation identified, it definitely doesn't mean you can't have children. It, you know, some people may actually do screening and testing in a way they'll go through like IVF and do actually screening of the embryos to only pick ones that don't have the genetic mutation that they know run on their family, and they can actually, you know, reduce the chance of having a child that gets that passed on to them. Some people say, no, I'm just gonna, like, I'm fine. I'm good with screening and prevention, and my kid will be okay with screening and prevention if that's what they need to do. So I'm just gonna have my children, and not let this be the main thing in their way.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
No, great question. Discussion. All right, Lula.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to say great conversation, and thank you all for putting this together, and it's great information for me. I'm always trying to stay on top of what's going on because of my BRCA2 diagnosis and having such a big family to help them. So I have a small organization here in Maryland I call 2 for 2 boobs, which is take 2 minutes to check your tube because early detection. And I always am encouraging women and men to get tested. So my question is 2. I'm a piggyback on the last question. My son is 26, and I was always told that he couldn't get tested until he was like 30 or 31 years old. So he can get tested earlier?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, for men, there's less screening that they would do right now. Like the screening doesn't really start until they're in their 30s and 40s, but he's an adult. He can be tested at any time he wants.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if he's like, okay, I know at 26, like there's not a whole lot I'm going to do differently with this information, but I want to know. He also, I don't know if his situation, like if he's thinking about having children or is married.
Yeah, so he is, and he's about to get married. Their wedding is September 12th, so I'm hoping it happens.
I know, right?
But, so yes, he definitely, wants to know, and we're encouraging, like I said in my question earlier, I have 7 brothers, and out of the 7 brothers, 3 of them have been tested. One attempted to get tested about 3 years ago, and his insurance wouldn't cover it, even though we had family history. So I'm not sure if it's state to state. He's in a different state than I am, and we're trying to get the other ones to do so. But
I was gonna say, I love the family testing program, particularly in families that have a lot of men that need to be tested. I've seen that be a good option just because they can go online, they can get their kit. It's $50. We send it home directly. They do their saliva. They don't have to leave their couch to do it. They can do. So I've seen that work really well for, sisters, mothers, daughters who are trying to get the men in the family to be tested.
So, and then the other comment I wanted to make is that in your presentation, you had mentioned about there may be possibly genes out there that has not been discovered yet. And I tend to think in a big conversation amongst young African-American women that it potentially probably is, because a lot of them are getting diagnosed, especially with triple negative, very early, that don't have family history. And a lot are dying from it because, of course, it's diagnosed late. So, you know, the question is, could there be a gene that's specific towards African Americans that has not been discovered yet, based on, you know, all these younger and younger women? I mean, like 18 and 20, early 20s, etc., and they don't have family history at all.
Yeah, I mean, there could be. I think there's probably a lot of factors at play. I've done some work few years ago where we did testing within all African American cohort, and they were all women who'd been diagnosed young, so at 50 or under, and we found about a 12% mutation rate, which is higher than you find in the non-Hispanic white population. So you know, we're finding that there's probably a fair amount of those people that get diagnosed young. There probably are mutations in genes that we actually know about. I've also worked on another study that looked at like how often women of color are being offered genetic testing or being talked about, like about their family history, offered genetic testing. And unfortunately, it's disproportionate to what gets offered for women who are Caucasian. So
and I'm happy I came on at a time that I think it was George Washington was doing the study, and I'm still part of the study today because I did the genetic testing. So they're following me, and every year I have to say who and what. So it's great information. Again, thank you for letting me ask some questions and be a part.
Great question. So yeah, it's a whole nother thing of trying to make access within other communities and minority populations to figure out what's going on there. But yes, there's probably genes out there that are causing, or it could be also that there's higher, when I was talking about those multifactorial genes where there's the little genes that each give a little bit of risk, those might be more common in certain populations. So you don't see the family history, but you do see the risk. So I think there's probably a lot going on.
You know, there's also a platform that I'd like to share also. My Gene Council, I don't know if any of you guys belong to it, but it's a phenomenal platform for women who even have negative genetic testing, you know, for your inconclusives, and gives you updates on new genes that are being found out there and the updated genes. So if any of you guys don't know about that platform, you guys should check out mygenecouncil.com, where it's like a $35 a year flat fee. You upload your results and they guide you kind of on like what screenings you need to do, the updated screenings that are coming out, like pancreatic screenings. They're saying there's now new screenings for pancreatic screenings. I know that they've sent out a couple emails and just updated information. Again, even if you're BRCA1, BRCA2, or you're inconclusive, the database basically goes on to give you updated information on things that they're finding now.
Yeah, the CAPS guidelines, which are what guides pancreatic cancer screening, those were recently updated, I think, at the beginning of this year. So we update our reports prospectively, but it's hard. Like, My Gene Council does a nice job of going back and like helping you sort of stay on top of things retroactively as well. Perfect. So we're not always able to do it fast as we would like.
Go ahead, Caitlin.
Using my daughters.
That's what I thought. I was like, wait, I was looking at you and I'm like, wait, that's not her.
I meant to change it and I didn't. I'm like, whatever. So I'm BRCA1 positive, as is my sister, my mom. My grandmother passed in her 40s. My brother is negative. So since he's negative, his kids are now in their 20s. He's older than I am. He's not having them tested. Is it absolute that they won't, or can it skip a generation?
It wouldn't skip a generation. So they would be negative from his side of the family, although they get half of their genes from mom. So I don't know what her family history looks like. And so there's always cancer, something over there. But if she's got little to no family history of, you know, cancer, it'd be very unlikely that they would have a genetic mutation. So if he's negative, it stops there. It stops with him. But again, I always say, like, that doesn't account for the other side of the family. You need to think of both sides. So even if you're a true negative for one mutation that we know, you got to consider the other side of the family as well. I think that's sort of the point I was making with your family, Tallulah, where you're like, we know we have a mutation identified in the family, but there's history on both sides. So doing a larger test or doing some update testing or additional testing for even people who tested negative may be relevant or may be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Does anybody else have any questions? Go ahead, Debbie. Ooh, let's unmute you. Did you get unmute? Oh, go ahead.
Okay. A question. I'm neither BRCA1 or BRCA2. I'm ATM and CDH1. So my mammogram came back with findings. So I am a scheduled prophylactic bilateral mastectomy coming up in September. Now, I had thyroid cancer. And thanks to COVID, I did have the MRI and have other testing, but some of the stuff that they need to do in order to determine whether or not it's lobular breast cancer can't be done because it's all deemed elective. Now, there was findings also that potentially some of my cancers could be related to Agent Orange because my dad was exposed. So in genetic testing, is there anything having like correlation with Agent Orange? I know it's a chemical, but.
Yeah, so with genetic testing, we're not able to look for sort of like chemical influences. Agent Orange is one of those things where it can be that second hit. It can cause, so if someone already has a genetic risk, this can be something that causes that second hit. It can also, like we know a lot of men who were exposed to it in Vietnam came back and 20 years later ended up with different types of cancer because of it. There's also, we don't know everything about it. So there's also chances it could have caused issues that perpetuated down the germ line, but that's not really been proven or seen. We know it to be more of like something that would impact where if one of your parents had this increased risk and they got this exposure, like your dad, if he had the ATM or the CDH1 mutation, he gets this additional influence, this additional exposure, that then he might be more likely than someone else who doesn't have that genetic risk to develop a cancer, to develop a disease in his lifetime.
And right now he's on hold. He can't get the testing because I'm in New Jersey and we're just starting to open back up. So there's a lot of places that aren't doing that face-to-face.
Color testing, we do test for CDH1 and ATM. So if he wanted to do a spit test at home, color could be available to him if he wanted.
Okay. So, and how does that, I only know the testing that I went through, the company that I went through, which was not your company. So I don't know anything. So I did, when Tracy brought it up, I did find it on Instagram. So, so the information is there in order for him to get a kit.
Yeah, so what you would, it might be easier for you. So you would go online. I can send the URL to Tracy and she can share it with people who attended to go online and apply for our family testing program. You can use the result from the laboratory that you went through testing for. And really, I'm just happy people are getting access to testing. So I don't care where they get tested, just I want people to get this information if they want to have it. So you can upload the result that you got. We'll check it and then we'll send your dad an email saying like your daughter Debbie, she wanted you to get access to testing. Here's how you can go online and purchase your testing kit for $50.
See, and I might even suggest that to my brother also, because it does say in my paperwork that my brother needs to get tested.
You can pick up to all of the family members who you want. Your brother, your siblings, your adult children, your parents would all be able to do that if they wanted.
Okay, awesome.
Get at home, like I said, from their couch. It's
yeah, it was pretty simple. So, okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Does anybody else have any questions? Go ahead, Nicola. We can't hear you.
Nicola, you're still muted.
No, she's unmuted. I think her volume's down maybe.
Or she's good. I think, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
There
there used to be false positives with some of these testings. What is the percentage rate for your testing with false positives and false negatives?
Yeah, so with our test, as well as most of the reputable major laboratories out there, the risk of a false positive, the risk of a false negative are quite low. I'll start with false positive. When we've done our validation testing, we had a greater than 99% sensitivity and specificity. Again, for positives, if we identify a mutation in you using our next generation sequencing assay, we do a second test. So we do a second test on an orthogonal or a new or different type of technology to find that mutation again. So if we did find it on our next generation sequencing assay, we'll do a Sanger type test to confirm that that mutation is truly present, that we can truly identify it. So if we get a positive result, it's very, very, very unlikely that it's incorrect. And that's for color, for any of the major laboratories, it's very, very low chances. For a negative, for a false negative, again, it's pretty unlikely that if you get a negative result that we missed it in the genes that we're covering, for just because of the depth of the coverage, the robustness of the analysis that we're able to do. More likely if someone gets a negative result and they do have a mutation, it would mean that that mutation is probably outside of the reportable range for that company's assay, or that it's in a gene that wasn't covered on that test, that they do have something, but it's outside of that, the testing that was done. So again, it's you know, very, very, very low chances of getting a negative result because the test missed something and that it should have picked up, or getting a positive result that's truly not there. So the testing these days are pretty accurate. I'd say one of the things you probably see in the news a little bit more are things where someone is told that a variant, the way that a variant is classified as pathogenic, or at the time when we classify it, the information we have available, we think it's going to cause an increased risk for disease. So we tell the person that's what it is. And then as we keep looking at that variant, you know, 10, 12, 20 years later, we get new information and we realize, you know what, I think we were wrong. This variant actually doesn't seem to be related to an increased risk for disease. And if I was to call this variant today, I would call it as a variant of uncertain significance, or I'd call it as a benign variant. So then you have to go back to the family and say, hey, we gave you the best information we had at that time. However, you know, today we actually think it's benign, or it's uncertain, and I wouldn't take clinical action on it, or vice versa, where we say at the time when we classified it, we didn't know enough. We didn't have enough information to classify this as positive. But today we do. Today we do, and we think it is actually going to increase risk for disease. So I know there was a story, I think it was in the Washington Post maybe 6 months or so ago, that was about a family like that. And it wasn't that they missed something, or it wasn't that they did something wrong. It was just they did the best they could with the information they had at the time to classify that variant for that family. And unfortunately, they said it was pathogenic. And as time went on, as they got more information, they actually revised that classification to negative. And, you know, obviously that had impacts for those families who'd had that variant. But that's one of the, you know, the things that laboratories are, I'm glad that they do, or it's good that they do, is keep checking these variants year after year, decade after decade, to make sure that the information that they're giving families, that they still think that they're correct. They still think they have the right answer for what this variant's impact on the gene or the risk for disease is going to be. Great question, though. All right, if anyone has any questions beyond this, Tracy has my email address. Feel free to let her know. I'm happy to, Danielle and I are happy to answer questions, you know, like offline as well. This is really, really great. Thank you so much for taking the time tonight.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
If anybody has any questions, they can feel free to reach out to us. And thank you again for coming on. You can feel free to reach out through us through Instagram or Facebook. Tallulah, I will send you a message. I'd love to connect with you to see how we can collaborate a little more. I know you're in Maryland and we're in South Florida. We have women on a national level and a private group on Facebook as well. So any way that we can help you. I know some of the ladies on here are either starting surgeries or starting treatment. If there's any way that we can support you, we'd love to. During COVID-19, we're sending out bags with just some goodies to make women smile and, you know, empower them, and just try to eliminate the feeling of isolation and let them know we're here to support them. So if there's anything that we can do at BRCA Strong, we'd love to do it. And thank you everybody for coming on. I know this was a an amazing call. Lily, thank you so much for donating your time and coming on. And Danielle, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that people hear other women's stories that are inspiring and, inspire them to go out and help other women. And that's really what we need, is just to make sure that the education is continuously flowing and we're educating everybody around the world as best as we can.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Have a